I love the fact that Georgia has the Qvevri. I love visual things, so I love the fact that we have something that has a shape that you can impinge on people's brains. I love the fact that it's not something that a designer did yesterday, that it is real, that it's got 8,000 years, that you can go and see them. I love the best Qvevri wines. I think there is a great potential to use Qvevri as an image of Georgia. However, I think there are huge dangers of going too far down the line of Qvevri. Firstly, it's a small part of Georgian wine, commercial Georgian wine production, and will always be. We're never going to make 50% of the wine here in Qvevri, to start with. Secondly, the definition of what is Khachetian and what is Western. There are different kinds of Qvevri wines. Some of the colors vary hugely, the quality varies hugely, and I think that most people will not like Qvevri wine when they first taste it, and most of those people will not taste it a second time. And I'm talking even potentially about some of the better Qvevri wines. It is not what they're used to drinking. The same is true of sherry. Sherry is not a commercial success in the world, so let's not look at that as our model. I think that Qvevri is a very, very useful way to promote Georgia, and those wines will be appreciated by a particular part of the market, a sophisticated market, particularly sommeliers. But we need to be sure to find the ways to move most of Georgia's wines, which is not Qvevri wine, into the homes and the restaurant tables of most of the other wine drinkers. Otherwise, we'll be driving up a street with no end. Orange wine, it's a bit like natural wine. It's a term that has arrived from nowhere, and a lot of people are using it. But when you say a lot of people, it's 0.00% of the wine drinking world. Legally, there is an issue, which nobody in Georgia and most of the other people don't talk about, which is that orange wine is a legally designated thing, and it comes from the Orange region in Australia. And there are maybe only 50 producers there, but every year there is an orange wine festival, and they make red and white wine from the place called Orange. There's also Orange River in South Africa. There's also in Spain, they talk about orange wine that is made by putting bits of orange into sweet wine. And lastly, in Florida, they make orange wine from orange juice. And even when we have what we're calling orange wine, the variation in color and style is wide. So I think that now is a good time to stop talking about orange wine. Then what do we talk about? Do we talk about amber wine? Amber wine is a Georgian description, from my understanding. So I like that. But the question is, who's going to own amber wine? If I make an amber wine in South Africa, is it the same as an amber wine from Georgia? And secondly, how do we define the different kinds? The deep gold wines with a lot of skin contact, possibly some oxidation, against the lighter ones that you might not even notice were made in that way. And I think that the person that I care most about, and the person that unfortunately the wine industry globally doesn't care enough about, is the consumer. And it doesn't matter whether you put amber wine or orange wine on the label, the consumer needs to know what he's expecting to get. So I would quite like to have a designation in Georgia of different kinds of amber wine. And for example, maybe we'd have light amber and deep amber. For example, but maybe when we start talking about regions, when we talk about regions it's quite complicated for consumers. Keep it simple. One of the things that has always struck, I've come here since 1988, the first time. Georgia has 500, more or less, grape varieties. Where are they? When I go to a restaurant, when I go to a tasting, there's Saperavi, there's Ricasatelli, there are others. Of course there are others, Msvani, but my point is, I don't see enough of them. And I don't want to see what's happening in Turkey, for example, happening here, where they say, well, actually we're just going to bring a lot more Cabernet Sauvignon and Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc. But you've got all those other grape varieties. And I think that one of the things that, in any situation, we always need to know how we got to where we are. Why are we here? And in Georgia, I don't think we can ignore the fact that this country went through that period of the Soviet system where agriculture was efficient. This wasn't small producers making the best wine they could make to sell in New York. This was, how do we produce large amounts of efficient white wine? And I think that explains why there's as much Ricapsatelli around as there is, for example. Now, what I've seen in other countries, if you go to Italy, for example, France also, you're seeing a revival of lots of small varieties that were almost dead that are being woken up. We're going to see that here. I think that's very important. And I would like to see, and I'm doing a tasting tomorrow here of micro-vinifications of other varieties. I personally have fallen, I won't say in love, but I like the Kisi, as I've tasted, much more than either Mzvani or the Ricapsatelli, and I think they've got more international appeal. Secondly, I think there are clones of Saperavi that are going to take us into other places with that. And there is a model for Georgia to look at in terms of what happened in Italy with Sangiovese. If we go back to the 1980s, Chianti was cheap wine in a straw-covered bottle, and one of the reasons was the Sangiovese that was planted was productive, easy to grow. When they brought back the older versions of that grape, the Chianti's improved. Malbec is getting better because of using better clones. So I think that now Georgia needs to spend money and, more importantly, brain power and enthusiasm on exploring so many of those 500 varieties in different soils, on different rootstocks, with different winemaking methods. It's a lot of variabilities. So I think it's going to take 20 years, probably, before we even begin to see some of the excitement that Georgia will produce. But the next 5 years, we'll see a lot of it. I did a wine tourism guide a few years ago. I think the thing about wine tourism is it's not entirely understood. A lot of people, certainly in France, they think wine tourism is opening the door, letting people to buy your wine at the winery, and that's it. That's not wine tourism for me. That's retailing. To me, wine tourism, in France, they think it's about people coming to your winery and buying wine. To me, it's not. That's retailing. To me, the word tourism is about how do I spend my leisure time. I only have so many days free of my life. This afternoon, do I go to the beach, the museum, the cathedral, the winery? And my wife and my children don't necessarily want to go to the winery. What is there? What do I get from it? So it's entertainment. It's the first thing to say. Second thing is that I don't think necessarily the fact that people have come to your winery and spent an hour in your winery and like that, is that going to sell 12 bottles or 500 bottles or one bottle? You don't know. The key to it is two things. One is everybody who comes to your winery is potentially an ambassador for your wine. They're going to go back to their country, they're going to go home, and they're going to say, we had a great time. This bottle, if they did buy a bottle or they bought a bottle in a shop, we saw the man who made this, we saw the place it came from. It's also incredibly important in terms, potentially, of building those long-term relationships. If you're taking those names of those people and you can email them and you can send them things so you can build that. The thing that's also not very appreciated is how do we actually use those moments where those people are in our wineries? Do we say, oh, you are my victim, I am going to give you some wine and take some money out of your pocket? Or do we say, look, now we're on a one-to-one situation. We've got 3 different wines here. We've just started to try a red label as well as our blue label. Which do you like? Do you like the red label or the blue label? And if you've had 500 people come to your winery and they've all made taken the trouble of coming to your winery and they like your other wines, and 300 and 50 like the red label rather than the blue label, that's valuable. You haven't had to pay an agency to do some research. You found things out. And the clever wineries, when I'm working with people, are the ones who use that whole experience of wine tourism in a broad sense. When it works, I think it's going to be great for Georgia, because Georgia has great food. Georgia needs to promote its food internationally, and wine tourism is going to be a great way of doing that.